Yes.
Planning, Dan, we ready?
Yes.
Planning, Environment, and Development Committee meeting of November 1st to order. We have minutes to approve for the meetings of September 6th and October 4th. Is there a motion to approve the meeting? Moved by Carolyn Campbell, seconded by Teresa Meshes. Is there any discussion regarding those meetings? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll move on to public comment. Gary Schauer, would you lead the list first? Would you like to speak?
I'd just like to...
If you want to come up and so it's on public record. You just come on up so the microphone is ready. So once you get your foot in this stuff, you got it.
I'd just like to thank the board and the people for considering this for me.
Okay, Gary's here on the granting refund for the permit fees that he didn't go ahead and get the permit on. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, that's fine. Mr. Schauer, thank you. That's Jan Vanderspool. Mr. Vanderspool, I think you've been here enough times to know we have the 3-minute limit on public comments. Everyone should have your handout. If you refer to it, I think everyone has a copy.
Hi, I'm Jan Vanderspool, calling myself Mr. Bull Run Estates. To be clear, first, I am asking that ancillary dwelling unit permits require notification by certified mail to adjacent neighbors, including hearing signage on applicant property visible from the street for the upcoming hearing date and identifying intention to build an ADU. Second, I am also asking that the county notify all permit applicants that covenants enforced only by court actions may supersede county allowances. The county serves the people. Provide for this notice on the basis of serving all the people. Serving all the people does not require a legislative mandate or permission to do what is right for the people. Please focus on covenant enforcement in court, which can supersede county allowances. De-emphasize home property owners associations, powers, or even existence. Please focus on the primary issue first. It is the greater good served by adjacent neighbor notice by certified mail and posted hearing notice when completed cost for the ADU is in the hundreds of thousands? Does it serve to address the unintended consequence? From inception in 2014, the Unified Development Ordinance conceived the value of homeowner property associations' input to Article 6 subdivision applications. In the previous PED meeting, this homeowners association involvement is proposed to be stricken in the next text amendment. I believe that my proposal for neighbor notice for ADU builds on this HOA covenant's recognition, which should not disappear in its entirety. By the numbers, my objection is one of 3 ADUs in subdivisions, therefore a 33 1/3% occurrence. It may be fair to assume that covenants forbidding any other dwelling unit on a lot may be in the thousands. In the following terms are defined in the UDO: dwelling unit ancillary as detached or a portion of a principal structure. Further, the UDO defines limits for ADU as attached or detached. With these definitions and limits, I need to say that the last PED meeting left me confused. I understood some ADU discussion to infer that attaching the ADU somehow voided the whole concept of being an ADU. I remain confused because the definitions and limits appear clear to me. I'm not trying to impact the I'm not trying to impact the moving forward with court notification. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on from public comment. Is there any other public comment here? Not seeing any. We move on to members' comments. Any members have comments this morning? No members' comments. We'll move on to new business. Resolution authorizing the adoption of the 2020 McHenry County Solid Waste Plan update. Moved by Mr. Godenholler, seconded by Carolyn Campbell. Schofield. Eddie.
I do have a short presentation, if you would like me to do it just with the overview.
That's fine.
Sure, how long is it?
Short.
Sure, yeah. Although, I mean, I think it'd be useful. I read through it, but sometimes you're reading through stuff and you're like, am I taking in all of the meaning? Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
just pass them down, that's fine.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. So it is the Illinois Solid Waste Planning and Recycling Act of 1988 that requires counties to be responsible for the management of solid waste within their borders. And it's also that act that requires then counties to create and maintain solid waste plans for that management. And in 2021, there was a public act, 1010074, that directed the IEPA to create a committee to increase landfill diversion rates, which is a very good thing. So they put the committee in place and created a report in July of 2021, and then that committee created new recommendations and also a new template for the county solid waste plans. And our plan that we have moving forward right now follows the new standards, the new templates created by that committee. So the biggest change in the process would be our current one that is expired now in 2022, where the emphasis was on recycling rates. So, recycling, to get those products either back into the economic mainstream via raw products or products. And the emphasis here is going to be on diversion. So it's a much broader term. And so diversion will include items and credit for things that we couldn't currently do. For instance, a big one would be waste to energy type diversions. So motor oil, medical waste, those types of things that go back in through to energy. Currently, we cannot credit those, but now we will be able to. So I think it's positive. I think it's a better emphasis on keeping the waste out of the landfills. And therefore, the state has then upgraded the goals that we have from the current 25% for recycling to 40% in 2025, 45% in 2030, and then 50% in 2035. Those are all very attainable. We can do that. That's not a problem. And then these plans are updated every 10 years, although traditionally McHenry County has done an interim one every 5 years. And once it is approved by the county board, it will go to the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, who then reviews it and approves it for compliance. So to develop our plan this time, we did work with a vendor for a 3-month period of time. We met with them and they provided us with information about landfill capacity, emerging technologies, relevant solid waste legislation. We worked very closely with our Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and we have pretty good representation there. It's hard sometimes to maintain our membership. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down due to other commitments, but we try to get, solid waste haulers. We have a municipal representative, a Farm Bureau representative, the environmental defenders of McHenry County, the MCC sustainability coordinator, and the water resources specialist for the county. So it's a good, group representative of the stakeholders. We also are a participant on the Waste Reduction Committee for the Environmental Defenders of McHenry County, so we were very active in their Sustainability Summit that was held this year, which was very well attended and well received. And so we're able then, through those connections, to kind of keep a better handle on what some of the emerging concerns are within McHenry County itself. And then we did reach out to our county townships and municipalities to solicit comments or concerns or recommendations. So that's how we approached it. And then one of the components is to evaluate how we did with the last plan. So in the last plan, we had 34 goals and objectives. And of those, we fully or partially implemented 28 of those. And so what we didn't implement would be the waste composition study, and that's because it's almost virtually impossible to get that on a county level. Landfills do not actually maintain that type of data, and I'll provide the most recent data that we have that was done on a large-scale study for the state. We did not do our quarterly municipal meetings. We really could not garner the interest and support to do that. And then lastly, we didn't really work on the deconstruction ordinance. So Dennis and I had multiple conversations about it. We just never really got to the point to actually put a draft in place and bring it forward for your consideration. So our target overall recycling rate in that plan was 45%. And we also had a target goal of reducing the pounds per capita of waste that's disposed in a landfill by each resident down to 3.57. So we averaged just under 40% on our overall recycling rate. So we had a range over that period of time of 33 to 46%. So we far exceeded the state, but we did not consistently meet our goal of the 45%. But we did not make a lot of headway on the pounds per capita per day. And the average overall is remained at about 6.91 with a range of under 6 to over to almost 7.5. So this is just the graphic of that overall recycling rate. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we get to that just in a second, but we do very, very well with our residential rates. So our residential recycling rates are typically over 40% and they're very consistent. Where we start to have some gaps is where we have to capture the non-traditional recycling and where we work with our commercial, industrial, and institutional. There is no mechanism really to capture that actively. It's voluntary, we seek it out. But since that represents over half of the waste that's generated, when you have less participation, 1 year it could drop 10%. I don't think the recycling rate drops 10%, but the participation and our ability to get the data drops 10%. So moving forward, we will be looking at, again, the residential sector, the commercial, industrial, and institutional, and then construction and demolition. That's how we divide out the waste sectors that we're looking at. And based on the new direction, we will look at it for traditional recycling, non-traditional, and then they have broken out separately organics. And organics and food waste is really a big component of the waste stream. So this is just a chart of that waste composition study that was done by the Illinois Recycling Association in 2015 with the Department of Economic Opportunity. Did I get that right? Anyways, so this is the study that was done. So you can see the big players in it. Organics were almost 28%. Paper, surprisingly, still over 22%. Construction and demolition just under 17%, and plastics, just under 16%. I mean, given how much we do electronically now, I think it's very possible our plastics are up a little bit and our paper's down a little bit, but these are the biggest players in the waste composition, as of 2015. So this is where we need to concentrate to get our biggest, changes and increases in the diversion rates. So I just wanted to give you a little, instead of providing with a bunch of data, I'm going to give you the PADI assessment of, where the solid waste program is after, from the last plan. We have a very good infrastructure in place, both in the county and in our solid waste program, and we have a good basis for our partnerships, and I'm going to list them here in a second. We have solid waste facilities and recycling facilities both in and around the county that are very active. That's a very good thing. Our franchise solid waste agreements, both the counties and the municipal, very active. Drug take-back programs. We do work really well with our solid waste advisory committee. They're very helpful. Our partnership with the Waste Reduction Committee of the Environmental Defenders of McHenry County, also great. Education through McSeep, very active, reaches tons of children every year. And we have comprehensive recycling opportunities in McHenry County through our townships, through our solid waste program, and through our community partners. In the programs that we sponsored over this time period, we recycled, just the ones that Kelly did, over 2.5 million pounds of recyclable materials in just the programs that we had. And of that, over 22,000 gallons of household hazardous waste. So we're just one of the players, in the entire system. So we do have, the opportunities in place. We have a great mechanism for collecting the comprehensive residential data, and we have an opportunity to become a permanent site for household waste, hazardous waste collection. The IEPA really likes the way that we do our events, and they'd like to make us a permanent site, which is really a wonderful thing. And then we have great partnerships with regional solid waste stakeholders, state organizations. We stay very active with the solid waste agency partners in Northern Illinois. But our greatest asset is that we have residents who are willing to participate in our recycling opportunities. So we get tons of participation, and people are appreciative and are willing to do it if we can make that opportunity feasible and economical for them. So here are the gaps. We need to do better with partnerships in the commercial area, particularly food establishments, schools, municipal areas, and the non-traditional. So they are out there. They're hard to get, some of these numbers, but I think it comes down to we need to do better at reaching out to them and forming those partnerships and actively pursue it on a routine basis. There's no real easy mechanism to capture that, so it's possibly knocking on doors and getting commitment to provide that. The non-traditional recycler data, some of those are very small, some are larger, they're hard to get. And when you're dealing with corporations or organizations that are very regional, it's hard to break out McHenry County data versus the Lake County data or Will County data. So we have to work harder at trying to make that data meaningful. We need to look at additional waste streams, and as I said, organics is made a priority. Food waste is a priority. It's a priority with the environmental defenders in McHenry County. It's a priority in our schools. We need them to be a part of that process. We need to have a better understanding of our facilities that do waste to energy. If you think of all the auto shops and everything that collect used motor oil and things like that, there's an opportunity there to collect the data. Deconstruction. Construction and demolition, we have very large, we have multiple construction and demolition recycling facilities and processing facilities in the county. We need to look at how we can actually, leverage those facilities and make that work for us. I think we need to commit to providing a better progress report on where we're at the solid waste plan. So we do provide information on our where we are, but I work a lot of the solid waste events, and I get asked every time if I'm with the McHenry County Defenders. So we need to do better at saying, no, there's a solid waste program for McHenry County. We're sponsoring the event. We have partners, and we do that. So we need to do better at that. I think we can do better by focusing on some annual solid waste campaigns. It's difficult, you get pulled in every direction, but I think if we focus on one thing at a time and do better about these are your opportunities, I think we'll make some progress. We need to do better with funding, so we do receive funding from the tipping fees. We're very appreciative to have that, but I think we need to do better at seeking out grant opportunities to partner with others to offer pilot programs and consultants that can go into these facilities and assist in evaluating what they do and how they can do it better. And then lastly, probably identifying any barriers there are to recycling and diversion in the county. So finally, our plan here is we've established 17 goals and objectives, and with each one of those goals and objectives, we have multiple strategies. So I'll just highlight a couple of them. With our solid waste franchises, we've done really well with those. We've been approached by Algonquin Township to assist with theirs. They're considering going to referendum right now, so then a large part of our population will be served by solid waste franchises. We need to look, though, as we move forward with those, is do we need to expand, to those franchises to include non-traditional recyclables? Organics can be recycled, you can have a contract, have household hazardous waste, electronics, et cetera. So we probably need to look into that. As I've said, the commercial sector and the non-traditional doing better with our partnerships and seeking out information. Let's see, the waste to energy sites. I think I've kind of covered these, but I'm just going to see if I missed one. I did, the grant or other funding opportunities, I did speak to Hans actually, and he's committed to assisting us to try to identify those, since he's, in that process so much to help us, when there's overlap or whatever, to see if we can work with some of those projects as well and do some solid waste initiatives as part of that. So that's where we're at, moving forward. I'm happy to answer any questions or any concerns you have. Yes.
Go ahead, Teresa.
So, I know personally my issue is organic. I've tried a number of times different ways to do composting, and it always turns out very disgusting. And at one point, our local, the garbage company would allow you to bring their organics to their facility.
Yes.
And I was embarrassed because ours were gross. But they stopped that.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the environmental defenders, when I saw them at one of the Earth Day presentations, they did a Planetpalooza, I saw them there, and they're like, oh, we can teach you how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that we can do, how can we help the community? Because I try really hard, and it's just it's rough. So what can we do to do that? And also I realize that my personal school system that I am most affiliated with also has a really hard time with doing any kind of recycling. Mm-hmm. So what are our plans for how we can get organics? People are willing to separate out their organics, but then they don't know what to do with them.
Yes, so I think the easiest way, the best long-term solution is to try to work those types of waste streams into the franchised agreements, because then people are willing to put it at the curb, you know what I
Right,
mean?
yes.
But it's not that easy to compost, if you're doing leaves and grass,
Yes.
most people can do that without a problem. You start working in the food scraps, and then if you're putting in some of the wrong ones that don't compost easily, things like that, it gets more difficult. So
Right.
I think that's probably the direction we need to go, is to work on not just ours, but with our municipalities as they're renewing them, so we
Okay.
do speak to them. And can we put in some of those harder to recycle items or non-traditional things and make it easy to do? Because if we make it easy, people will do it. So I think that's it. On the schools, we do hear that, frequently, and so we've been looking for some funding to do some, pilot programs there where they, someone could go in and just assist them, work with some of the high school environmental science classes, to do some waste audits or things like that with projects that might work into their curriculum, but, also be useful to the school. Again, it's just kind of understanding what those challenges are, and then we're gonna have to work with them to try to eliminate those barriers, to make it happen going forward.
Alright, so, but there are some kind of plans, so you're thinking about pilot programs, you're thinking about, or I did think to myself, maybe if I could reach out to my neighbors, we could all do one bin, because the problem was the organic bin was really expensive, why would I pay weekly for this really expensive bin when my amount's gonna be well, actually my amount might be that much,
Right.
but,
Right. But we found, and our experience has been with franchise agreements, is when you're dealing with the larger numbers, for instance, when we wanted to do leaf pickup, and we do leaf pickup.
Right, yes.
But it makes sense on a larger scale, but if you have 10 people here and 10 people here that want that pickup, even with the landscape waste, that was extremely expensive. So making it universal, making it part of that process, that's where we're gonna get the best, value for that waste stream, if that makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else?
On that note of getting services blended into franchise, can you discuss the rumor I've heard that Algonquin Township is considering a referendum to have an unincorporated franchise?
Yes.
And what would that mean for some of your goals?
Yes, so and Kelly, this is Kelly Beckman. Kelly Beckman is our solid waste manager. So as I sit here, she's doing all the work. I'm just kind of capturing it for you. So she does such a good job. And she's been contacted by Algonquin Township and asked to come and speak at one of their next meetings. They would like to look at that. Now, London Township did do that. And they went to referendum, and their voters voted to then ask them to put a solid waste franchise in place for the entire township. And really, they've really benefited from that. They're typically economically very viable, and then also more comprehensive services. So Algonquin, she will go and speak at that. So they're looking at two different options. One is asking the board to vote on whether or not they would like to put that on as a referendum issue. If they choose not to, then it is possible that they will make a request to us, similar to what McHenry Township did, not the township itself, but residents, to facilitate a solid waste franchise for them. And that is something, if they did do that, I would bring here to you to discuss. And our process for that is to go out and notify all of the people, and then actually have meetings, and then determine interest, and then move forward. But the township itself, if they have a referendum and it's positively received, then they have the ability to do it on their own behalf for every township resident in Helmond.
So how does that impact the towns that actually have franchise
It
agreements?
does not. So it's the unincorporated areas only. So each municipality will have their own, and then we've had that too. So, over a 4-year period of time with a franchise agreement, it's not uncommon for properties to go from the unincorporated area into the incorporated area, then they come out of ours and they get rolled into the other one. It just happens all the time. So it would not affect the municipal residents at all. But what it does do is it provides that easy way, to get the recycling done. We capture the data, and we get good participation in ours. Whether or not Algonquin Township wants leaf vacuuming or whatever, they may choose to do organics, or they may choose to do household hazardous waste.
Are there already some subdivisions in unincorporated Algonquin Township that might have a contract?
I'm not aware of those that have current contracts. In McHenry Township, we did encounter that,
Yeah,
where there were several.
I took a call from a former board member on
So
that
you know.
subject.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And so what we did in McHenry Township is then when that one expired, rolled them into the other one. So it can all be done, it's just a matter of knowing
Timing.
who's, working with it.
So I have a question. So when you talk about the recycling rate is at 30+%, you hear things about how we do all this stuff to get the plastic out there, and only 5% of it ends up getting recycled once it gets to there. So we may be diverting it out of our landfills, but is it actually getting recycled?
Yes, it's a really good question. So last year, Kelly and I went to one of the material recovery facilities in Lake County to look at that and to try to understand what some of their challenges are. So what happens is, and we've tried to do some education on this to improve the quality of the recyclables. So the higher the quality, the higher likelihood. So China, that receives a lot of recyclable, takes a lot of the recyclables from the US. In the past couple of years, they decided that they were going to they were not going to accept anything that was not 95% uncontaminated or more. So as you can imagine, if you get a big pile of stuff with a bunch of contaminants in it, so things that cannot be recycled, things that they cannot handle easily, they reject it. And so that did create quite a tremor down the recycling, system. And so we've tried to do some education with that. But when you're talking plastic wrap, plastic film, and things like that, if it ends up at the material recycling facility, it depends on what the market is. But there are some very active programs. Jewel has one, for instance, where they collected all of the Northern Illinois region, and they partner with others, and that is recycled. So we have to kind of work with those types of programs. When we provide a program here, we always look at our downstream vendors to make sure that, I don't want to have a battery recycling event and find out that it's stored in someone's barn somewhere. I need to know that it's going to the place where it's actually going to be recycled into its component parts. And so we do our part on that. We just need to continue to work with others to make sure they're doing the same.
Because I think there is a lot of contamination. I mean, we had done, the Green Drinks does their programming all the time, and I think during COVID, we had the recycling coordinator come in from Kane County. Even black plastic, they don't really want black plastic because there is no end product for black plastic.
Right.
And if something's too flat, it can't go through the system, it gets stuck, and there's just all sorts of things that get contaminated.
Yeah, and they'll talk about tanglers, so, someone wants to put a rubber hose in there because, hey, it should be recyclable. Well, we could argue that point, but if it ends up in that machine, it's gonna shut down that whole machine for half a day as they untangle it. So there are a lot of items like that. So we need to just continue to do better to educate our residents about what to put in there. Whether it should be recyclable, you need to limit it to what it will be recycled, and it makes the whole process. And then the other part would be closing that loop at the end and demanding recycling products, or recycled products, right? To make sure that there is that end market for those recycled materials, to get them back into the mainstream.
Great, and no one else? Great presentation. Certainly appreciate all the work that's been done on it.
Thank you.
Very, very nice, very concise, complete.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, we have a resolution on the floor to authorize the adoption of the solid waste plan program. Is there any other discussion? We'll go to vote. Okay, Michelle?
Yes.
Teresa?
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield?
Yes.
Carolyn Campbell?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So that'll move forward.
Okay.
I think that was our presentation number 6. I don't think there's any other presentations that I know of. No? Okay. We'll move on to the routine consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they want to remove from the routine consent agenda? Teresa?
I think I'm gonna move that we do them each separately, because I want to talk about 7.1 and 7.3.
Okay. Is that consensus of the group?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, we'll go to 7.1 then. Resolution granting a refund of permit fees for building permit K3754 for Gary Schauer.
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Teresa, seconded by
Sure. Second. I'll second.
Carolyn Campbell. Okay, any discussion on this?
So I'm looking for, there, here.
Yeah, sorry.
I usually sit over there. Now I know I must always sit over there. So my understanding from looking over it is that Mr. Schauer had put the permit in, but now realizes that he's not interested in going through with this permit because of costs of construction. What is the history of us doing the refund? Like I understand why he would want the refund, but what kind of costs would be the plan that you already put forth to do the work that comes with permitting?
Sure.
So, to your first question.
Yes.
The 25% initial submittal fee.
Yes.
We haven't refunded those unless they are miscalculations, either overpayments or miscalculations of the permit fee itself.
Yes.
So if it was initially brought in at 2,000 square feet, ended up being 1,000, and then we would reduce that tier and then give that refund based on that. But we have not issued any administratively. They would have to come through the committee. And then as far as work into it,
Yes.
there's no external work, so there's no invoices that are pending or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's really, our staff did the review. We did counter review, intake, and then we did actual reviews at our desks. So, I mean, in total, it wasn't more than a week, and I think at a day, because we had it in, did those initial reviews, and then it went through all the divisions between October 7th and October 14th. And that's when we notified the owner that it would be available for pickup, pending payment of the outstanding balance.
I think that answered my question.
Okay, Carolyn.
So to build on that, so how often do you get somebody who does not go through with the permit, but doesn't necessarily come back for the refund?
I would have to pull the exact numbers,
Okay, yeah,
but
but
it does happen.
it does happen, but-
I would say, so I process invoices Thursday and Friday every week. We will have one on there probably every other week or so, and it's cancellations or refunds for that 75% if they paid the permit fee in total, or if there was a miscalculation, and that'll happen too. Sometimes we'll get vendors that mail in their permits, solar farms or solar installations on roofs, and they never show up, but it's an incorporated parcel. So we'll take it in, process it, and then, hey, wait a minute, realize it at that point, and then we'll process those refunds. So it's about once a week in terms of that.
Anything else? Teresa, are you okay with it then?
Well, I was just trying to figure out, one of the things that we're always talking about at the county, I totally understand why Mr. Schauer would want the $1,000 refund. I'm just wondering on the, the county level, when we talk about like our fees, and for $1,000 isn't gonna break the county, but, I'm always thinking about what's our precedent on, services, right? So that we talk about if we're gonna not, our income to the county does help lower our what we need for property taxes and whatnot. So like, although $1,000 doesn't make a big difference to us, if it's a precedent where we start giving back more and more.
Yeah, and Adam and I have talked.
Yes.
And, what this committee will look like in January, I don't know.
Right.
But I think our discussion leaned towards any of these, whether it's a fee waiver request or a refund, is how much time and money did we have into it? And is there a
Right.
way we can set a policy that if there was outside consultation, then the fee waiver or refund would be a certain percentage, and try to make a solid policy on it.
Okay.
This one is a little bit different because there was some confusion as to what Mr. Schauer was told at the counter that we can't seem to get a grasp on from our side, one way or the other.
Okay.
And there's certainly nothing on his paperwork that would say he should not get the refund. So there's a little bit more work we need to do on our side, make sure that if anything needs to be more clear on our end. So.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm in favor of granting the refund. I don't think it should be an issue in this particular instance.
Can Adam clarify that?
Sure. So there, can't confirm, there was maybe a statement that was made at the application time that if they do withdraw it, then they would be able to get the money back. And that was kind of the basis of, I want the cancellation of the refund. On top of that, there was nothing in the paperwork that Larry was talking about, nothing in the paperwork that stated clearly either on the application or any of the permit packets that were issued, either at the time of application or at the time of issuance in total, that, or the receipt, that the 25% would be non-refundable.
Okay. A big difference.
We're actively addressing that
Okay. Good.
going forward.
Yes.
There'll
Yeah,
be
so
some-
we're gonna be doing that, putting something in place that would kind of talk.
We're gonna talk about a policy that's gonna
Yeah.
be more written and better training for the people behind the counter to make sure there's no confusion.
Okay.
Because this one could have been on us.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Okay, any other discussion? We'll go to vote. Joe?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Campbell? Carolyn Schofield?
Yes.
Teresa Meshes?
Yes.
Michelle Avang?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, so that refund will be given for the, for that particular permit. Okay?
Does this go up to the full board or?
Oh, yeah, we've got to take it to the
It
full
does
board,
go
I'm
to-
sorry.
yeah, it does
Thank
go
you,
to the
Joe.
full board.
So our recommendation will be that it is refunded, but it'll go before the full board in December?
No,
November,
Yep.
okay. I got my dates off, I was trying to figure my schedule for December. Okay, yes, in November, in a couple weeks, I guess, at the night meeting. Okay, we'll move on to 7.2, resolution amending the intergovernmental agreement between McHenry County and the Department of Natural Resources for a state local food hazard mitigation project grants.
Flood hazard.
Flood hazard, yes.
Flood. Clean my glasses, huh? Flood hazard.
I'll make the motion.
Okay,
I'll second
motion by
it.
Drees, seconded by Joe. This has to do with an extension of the houses that, the grant for the houses that need to be demolished, I believe, is it?
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
so for the floodplain buyout program, we've got 2 more houses that are included in this grant from 2020. We're operating under an extension right now, and we're gonna further request that extension. It's just a matter of wrestling these and negotiating them down from the bank. And they just have not been as responsive as we would have desired, and we don't necessarily see it. We hope it doesn't go into 2024. We really hope that next fiscal year it's all wrapped up, but the ball is really kind of in their court.
So these bank-owned properties, Adam, or foreclosures?
They,
They're both, I mean, they started
one
as
of each,
foreclosures,
yeah.
and now they're owned by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Okay, so we're not dealing with an owner going through foreclosure, the foreclosures happen, finalized?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
so
they are
that should
bank-owned.
move along within the year, I'd hope.
You'd be
Fingers
surprised.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
So why are we not going farther than that, or is it just to kind of, because we're going out 2 years, but only because the thing went through last year, when we're only gaining another 1 year because of where we're sitting?
We should be okay. These are the last 2 homes.
Okay, so you think
One
we
is
should be
ready
okay?
to close.
Okay.
And so then demolition is the only piece left. The other one, we're trying to get to the table. They're okay with our amount, but we just can't get the contract paperwork going until the agreement is signed. So the last step, once we buy, is to demolish, restore, and the rest of the houses are at that stage, and they're already restored. This land's already restored.
Okay.
But it's not, sorry,
Go ahead.
it's not, when it says 1.4 million on there, that's not for 2 houses, is it?
No.
That was the total grant.
Okay,
No,
that's kind of
goodness
confusing the way it's worded,
gracious.
because it says, the way it was worded, it said that 1.1, but then it says an additional 1.4, but is 1.4 actually the total? Okay, that would make, that's what I was thinking, but, okay, perfect,
And
thanks.
this is just to keep the grant package open for another year.
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll go to vote. Teresa?
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield?
Yes.
Carolyn Campbell?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. We'll move on to 7.3.
I'll make the motion.
Resolution authorizing execution of a stormwater management ordinance, conservation easement in lieu of stormwater storage for permit on Howe Road. Moved by Teresa, seconded by Carolyn Schofield. Any discussion on this? Let's have Joanne speak to it before we
Yes.
worry about asking questions, I
Yeah,
guess.
that would be great, thank you.
The Goodmark Nurser is at that property right there. So they originally had gotten a permit in 2017 for some work that they wanted to do, propose some new structures, some new parking lots to create gravel driveways and such. So they had initially gotten a permit back in 2020 for that additional work, along with a conservation easement. So that conservation easement is allowed in the stormwater management ordinance to allow for large properties such as this, or those that can meet the standards, to not have to put in traditional detention basins. The conservation easement is something that we allow to let's say they've got 100 acres, up to 5% of the property can be impervious, and the other 95% is put in a conservation easement as open space in perpetuity. until either they put in a detention basin for the amount of impervious that they've provided based on the ordinance standards, they remove that impervious that triggered the conservation easement, or they revise the permit to meet either standard. So in this case, they did get a conservation easement back in 2020 as part of the original permit. They've since decided they want to do some additional work, and then we noticed some additional impervious gravel outside of the conservation easement area based on our inspections as the ongoing permit was happening. So they came in and they revised their permit, and part of that, they have to revise their conservation easement boundary. So it's not that they're asking for any additional requirements or additional variance, let's say, for the conservation easement. It's a revision to the original conservation easement that was placed on the property back for the permit back in 2020.
To accommodate the additional stuff going on in the regular park. So they're adding to the conservation easement?
Correct.
So they've satisfied everything that we've asked them to do, and it's all,
Based on the ordinance standards, you as the county board need to approve any conservation easement that is allowed or asked for on a specific property.
anyone else? Okay, we'll go to vote. Jeff?
Yes.
Carolyn Campbell?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Teresa?
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And I'll say yes. That'll move to the full county board. Thank you. Old business. Nothing under old business other than what I had brought up previous that I said I'd talk to Adam about, because I had a board member ask me to look into setting some kind of policy for the fee waivers and refunds about, and my suggestion was maybe how much time that we had in it, or if there's any outside consultation, like I said, and try to build some kind of policy. But we'll look at that in January with the new committee, is what we discussed. And also, as long as it's on my mind, our December meeting has been canceled already. I don't know if anybody noticed that or not. But, okay. We'll move on to reports. ZBA and hearing officer reports. Zoning applications.
Okay.
Renee?
You have 4 petitions before you this month. Nothing terribly controversial. The first on the list is the Hunt Club of Richmond. So that business, it's on 176 near Richmond.
173.
I'm sorry, 173. And it's a clay pigeon shooting. Yeah, good word. Thank you. It's been there for a number of years. This is at least the 2nd round of conditional use for it. They, in the last 10 years ago, when they came through the process, they decided to add paintball to the mix. But I guess that didn't go over so well. So they've taken away the paintball now, and it's back to just the clay pigeon shooting. There was an anonymous complainer that sent us tons and tons of information, nothing that we could ever really substantiate about complaints, that sort of thing. So they didn't show up at the public hearing, so we don't know who that was. So we consider that there were no complaints.
What was it? Was a complaint specific to something? The paintball?
It
the
was
hunting?
noise that they have these big events
Okay.
that the sheriff's department has been called out to. Well, they've had in the past, they work with the Boy Scouts and they have some big event for gun safety.
Well, that's what I was curious about,
With the
because
Boy
I've been
Scouts?
over in that area when they have, what do they call it? Mud monster runs?
They do,
Where
yes.
they go
do
on the
tough
trails
runners,
and you gotta
tough
climb over
runners,
stuff
yeah.
and do that. And it draws quite a crowd.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're,
But we contacted the sheriff's department and there hasn't been any complaints about noise.
okay, I don't think they've had them, but maybe once or twice a summer for the last few years they've been popular.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that, it comes to you with a full recommendation for approval. And then, the next one is the Barron's property, that's on Lily Pond. It's a relatively small, outdoor storage area for recreational vehicles. It, was awarded a conditional use and they're up for renewal. There's been no complaints with it. There was no opposition at the hearing. The Meyer petition is a simple variation. They are a very odd-shaped lot. They're a corner cul-de-sac lot, which makes it very difficult to do detached buildings. So they're asking for a variation to build a detached garage effectively in one of the 3 street yards. And then the last one is in Township. It's a very classic 2-acre A1 to A2.
Anyone have any quick questions or concerns? Okay, thank you, Renee. Adam's gonna, Mr. Gadamoller is going to step out because we're going to discuss the Henning Estates project for a moment, so we give him a second to step out. We'll come and get you in a few minutes, Joe. This isn't going to take long.
No, one of these is loading.
Okay, Adam, you want to give us an update on the Henning Estates project, please?
So Henning's is moving along. We have monthly construction meetings with the construction manager and then each of the contractors.
They've done a lot of the, if you will, low-hanging fruit, some of the repairs and painting, trenching, and they've redone the ditches all the roads were redone initially and accepted by the township. The ditches that were associated with those newly accepted roads were a little wonky. And so those have been completed, regraded, starting to transfer a lot better already in terms of not holding water, and not having intense runoff in other places and other locations. They're not done, but they're about 90% complete with the grading and the stormwater treatment. Stormwater system work. On the other side of the wastewater treatment system, we have a little bit of lead times that are coming to the end of those ropes right now for generators. They're hopefully pouring the pads this week for the generator. This is about as good of opportunities they'll get in November. And so there's a lot of, I've gotten 2 emails today and I had a couple from yesterday, copied on from the construction manager, pushing and prodding their folks along to make sure it gets in. If we do get hit with a winter, we won't be done by spring with the entire scope. The HOA is aware and on board with that. They understand, but it would be nice to knock a few things off. So that's our current goal.
Is there any hard deadline on any of that, or?
There isn't. There isn't. As soon as we turn it over, that's when it becomes, the clock starts ticking in terms of the HOA has to build up their reserves to maintain it now. They've gotten on their feet, but that's kind of why they aren't necessarily objecting to the delays, because it doesn't start that clock right away. But they're ready for us to be out of their hair.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they want to get it done, get it in shape.
Yeah. Probably the biggest piece that's come through this week, there's a little bit of a discovery of a waste line up on one of the branches that the HOA owns. We were able to obtain a credit for something else about 3 weeks ago. That was far more substantial than we really anticipated, and we're hopefully able to take care of everything in terms of not only diagnosing that branch, what the issue was, what was blocking it, but also take care of it and fix it for them. So that'll be a big sigh of relief for that group, that they'll be able to open up about 15 more parcels to sell with a clear conscience of that there's no issues, no errors.
Anything else?
That's about it. Bid package B is still kind of in flux. That's the open space. There's still that pocket of money that's attributed to that or income for that, but it's not yet being executed and pushed forward because we want to make sure that there's no other major things like that storm sewer line or the waste sewer lines that have been collapsed or something else that could be fixed with that.
Okay.
Can you remind me
Go ahead.
how many homes in total that are there versus open lots? Do you know?
Sure.
If you don't know offhand, sorry, just kind of remind me of scope.
Oh, I didn't include that in here. My little, I've been carrying that forward for however many long. I'll provide
That's
that to
okay.
you.
No, I was
I'll
just curious,
follow up
just
with
thought
that.
just to remind me of the scope. Okay.
Yeah, I'll provide that to the committee.
Okay, sounds good. We'll move on to the ancillary dwelling units. As soon as I find Mr. Goodenow. Take it over off.
I relied on the system, the new one for the HTML, and every time I go to, it worked perfectly at home, but now I'm trying to.
Yeah, we used to have,
And it won't bother.
ours used to,
Not one of
now
them.
they don't.
Right, so they can't
And I
just say-
switched to my hotspot, and so I'm not figuring this out.
Okay, Mr. Goodenow is back in the room. And we're going to move on to 9.3, the UDO ancillary dwelling unit discussion.
Yep.
Okay, Adam, you got anything new other than we chatted a little bit? Mr. Goodenow has given us a very interesting handout. Do you want to talk about your handout, Joe, or I can take a summary of what I took away from it?
Go right ahead.
Okay, what I took out of it is that when a municipality or county didn't put a plan in place for ancillary dwelling units, the state, in California anyway, the state took over and said, hey, you're gonna do it, and then passed laws, so there was no choice but to allow them. Certainly, we have someone who thinks, is very concerned that what we have isn't as good as it could or should be, but I think from my point of view, we certainly don't want the state of Illinois to ever step in and start telling us what to do with this situation, as we don't want the state of Illinois to be telling us what to do with anything. So we, I didn't know how else to say it. We don't want the state of Illinois telling us how to run McHenry County if we can help it. So I think there's some necessity for us to address this situation. What we do with it, I guess is up to the committee if we got any ideas right now. I had talked to Adam earlier in the week, because I knew this was going to be coming up, and I had actually read this article earlier. We're going to have no meeting in December and a new committee in January. I don't see that we're going to get anything done with this particular part of the UDO until the first of the year when we address other issues with the UDO. So Adam and I had talked about putting this off until January and letting them come up with some proposals along with the other changes to the UDO that we address in the first part of the year every year, and deal with it then. I don't know if the committee members have any other ideas or what they would like to do. Go ahead, Teresa.
Well, so I think that Mr. Vanderspool's suggestion that there's some language put into the permits saying you need to check with your covenants makes sense, because the point of one of the points that our community members brought up is that he didn't realize what was happening until he felt it was too late to stop it. And I can appreciate that at some point you think to yourself, well, I should have done this earlier, but I didn't know I should have done it. And if the request that a letter goes to the neighbors, also I think wouldn't be, we don't even have to say that we're gonna send the letter. Proof that they sent a letter to their neighbors so their neighbors can check, because if somebody had in his case, this community member's case, if he had let his neighbors know what was happening, the neighbors could have said, this is not allowed in our subdivision by covenant. And then, that would, I don't think that's a big burden to put on permit seekers, is saying you have to have given notice to your neighbors that you're gonna do this, so the neighbors then have knowledge and the ability to tell them, you're not allowed to do this by the rules of our subdivision.
Don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I think there's some issues on how it's enforced or not enforced.
Yeah.
Because of that subdivision, homeowners association.
Yeah.
That person can still go forward with the permit the way it is right now and do
Right.
it. and the homeowner association would have to take some kind of civil action to
Right,
enforce
they
the
would,
rules.
yes, right, we're not gonna stop it, but I think that, yeah,
But there, and that's what Ed and I have been talking about, how to do that, how to get it past the state's attorney's office, how
Yeah.
to make sure we're not putting ourselves in a bad place. But it's gonna take some time. What do you think about what Teresa said in the written notice to the adjacent property owner? I don't see that that should be a problem.
So it wouldn't be a problem until there's an objection, you know,
And then who objects?
and then really, it would be unenforceable on our end. It would be very similar to what we've done, I think I brought this up at the last meeting, where we've done with fire districts, where the fire districts, they just don't have the statutory authority to object to a single-family residence, or require certain things. We wouldn't be able to withhold, their objection wouldn't mandate that we withhold the permit. So we would be issuing them.
right, yeah.
And.
Yeah, I acknowledge, yeah, we can,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
And so we kind of put this quasi, we're in the middle of issuance of a permit by right and conditional use process. It can be done. The other thing that flies up to me is fraudulent letters or other scenarios where the neighbors aren't necessarily within a block, that are a mile.
Yeah.
And then those to receive notice too, and the same justification. So those are the first three things that pop into my head. I've given Renee a little bit of time to think. If she's got anything additional.
I think that the first thing that occurs to me is, the thing that people get most upset about are fences.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna do it for ancillary dwelling units, I think that it would open up a can of worms, and then where do you stop? Because then, if you're putting a fence on my property line, that really impacts me, so I should know about that. So I see that as
To that
an
point,
issue.
we issue numerous permits that don't jive with covenants. They don't jive with neighbors.
Right, pools, fences,
Yeah, above ground
Yeah.
pools, detached garages, sheds, etc.
Yeah, I guess I think that the ancillary dwelling unit is more concerning than a fence, but I understand you have more fences than dwelling units, so. Yeah, Carolyn?
But it's the same problem, I think, and so I don't know, going back to when we were talking earlier about like the non-refundable aspect, is there some kind of informational sheet when somebody comes to apply for a permit that you give them on, like, okay, thank you, and then, you say fees are non-refundable, make sure you notify homeowners associations, just like a checklist, so like at least you've presented it, now it's kind of on them.
It would have to be signed and put in the file, otherwise they would forget that they got it.
I guess.
And that's sort of our issue with what.
We could put it in terms of if you will, a general permit condition.
Right, that's what I
Right.
guess I'm
Right.
looking, like
Right.
somewhere where they're notified of it, because really realistically, we can't hold up a permit, waiting for them to respond. The mailing thing, unless it's certified mail, they're gonna say, oh, it got lost in the mail, I never got it. We've kind of been round and round on these things, they've all come up in the past, and Joe, and I have been around long enough where we've seen it all before, and Michelle too, but I don't think you're on the committee, so, but, it's just, there's been a reason for all of them, and we've seen a scenario where both sides have come up. So I don't know if we can at least say, okay, now it's on you.
Well, I will say, I'll give you an example where we do that is with chickens. We have a registration form for people that want to do backyard chickens, and right on there, we have the disclaimer. This is, aside from your homeowners association rules, you are responsible to check and make sure that you can have the chickens. So in that case, we do that.
Yeah, so something.
Well, that seems like we should be able to do something like that for this case too, right? Joe?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with telling the person at the counter, you've got to go make certain your association doesn't object to this. But I have trouble mailing out letters to neighbors because it implies that we're going to do something different, and we're not.
Yeah.
We're stuck in this same boat to do that. And my concern is also, where do you draw the line at? If I remodel my kitchen, do I have to tell the neighbors? And I know that's the other extreme, because it's all internal and whatever, but you know, the fact of the matter is that, you know, again, you solved this problem 4 years ago by putting a breezeway between you and the other house. And, you know, it was still allowed to be built and nobody thought twice about it. You know, and now we've just said, let's be realistic and say that it's 900 square feet in the backyard or in the side yard or wherever. You know, I mean, in this instance, you know, it's concerned the neighbor greatly, but the fact of the matter is they still haven't organized an association. This is a 30-year-old subdivision that doesn't have an association, an active association. So if it had been, you know, his only choice ever was to go to court and ask this not to be allowed, and he could have done that. There's a serious question as to whether or not the covenants would have been enforced, even if he'd done that. I mean, it's not a good result for him, because after 30 years of no enforcement, it's pretty tough to say, you know, why are we doing it now? And that often defeats the covenants, because they were never enforced and the association wasn't active. And I see why the association is active. It's got what, 10 homes in your subdivision? Is it 10 lots?
It's about 15.
Okay, 15 lots. It's still tough to get 15 homeowners or lot owners to organize an association and keep it going. You know, if you've got 4 officers, you know, you've got almost a quarter of your, or a third of your homeowners involved in every meeting. I mean, it's just tough at that level. It's tough to do it. And so, you know, you end up with covenants that the only persons that can enforce them are their neighbors.
Right.
It's still going to be that if we send the neighbors a letter.
No, I agree, yes, but one of the things I think is that I'm sympathetic to the statement. If I knew he was gonna do this, I would have stopped it earlier.
Sure.
It got too far. And when, you know, the article they shared was, which I will read later, if you think of the fact that my sister lived in one of these ADUs in California, when I finally saw this place you're talking about, I couldn't believe this was allowed, because they were all on top of each other. And she lived in what looked like a shed. So, I can also see how you wouldn't want that happening across your neighborhood. But we have, how big your acreage have to be? Your lot has to be how big to get
It's not a lot.
It's any residential.
any residential?
Setbacks are what limits it though.
But there's an impervious surface
The impervious
requirement,
surface,
so even if you, depending
Yeah.
on what your lot size,
Yeah.
I mean, what we're talking about, these are really big lots, but isn't there, like, you have a total impervious surface that's available to you?
You have a building coverage and an impervious surface.
So one's
what-
for the UDO and one's for the stormwater management ordinance, and
Well,
actually
they're-
both of them, yeah.
They're both in the
Yeah, they're both
UDO,
in the
but
UDO.
one is for building, for anything with a roof on it. So these, along
Sheds.
with your house, with your detached garage, with your shed, all have one regulation.
Mhm.
And also, there's an impervious surface regulation, which would then include your pool and your
Driveways.
sidewalks and your driveway and all those sorts of things.
But combined, is there a total percentage that that your lot can't be beyond a certain amount of those combined, so that there's somewhere for the water to go, I guess is where I'm
Yeah,
getting.
typically it's 50%. It's about
In total, and
50%.
you would think between buildings and.
In residential, with all impervious.
It's
And then the
50%.
building coverage is about 35% in most districts.
Of that 50%.
The same
35
35%.
of the overall site.
Right, could be the buildings.
But so
In total, you're talking about 50% of.
50% of
right.
impervious.
That's what I
surface.
meant, in total.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah, Carolyn?
Question, on the sheet, did you do this? Or did you-
Did not.
Mr. Van der
See
Spoel did
this?
that.
I think actually was.
I'm assuming got it from Gavin,
Yes.
somehow that you mentioned. I was just curious, and Joe said it a couple times, what's an attached dwelling, ancillary dwelling unit? I mean, isn't that just part of the
It's
residence?
building out another kitchen and another bedroom and another, place to live in the same building.
Oh, yeah,
in-law
but-
Yeah,
suite.
the difference would be the standalone garage-esque form that would have.
Well, right, but I guess I thought we just treated that as part of the residence, no?
Well, it could be considered a duplex on our one lot, so this is,
If they're using it in that manner, so then that would allow them to truly lock it all
Oh,
up
and
and
have
keep it
another.
separate, have dual entrances, dual mailboxes and all that. Prior to this, we would come across those that were divided up. Dual mailboxes or, with two entrances, with two separate garages on
And that
each
would have
side.
changed the zoning, kind of,
It-
before if there were like two families living there.
Yes, yeah.
And now they can do it under this.
Well,
Yes.
and along the Fox River and the stuff, there used to be all kinds of places where, you know, the main house and then someone would convert the garage into something and they would rent it out as a
Right.
B&B for the summer type stuff.
Right.
I mean, I'm not suggesting that's what we want to go to, but that would happen for years.
So I guess I was always thinking of detached, I guess I was not realizing we did them the same, either attached or detached.
so, I don't know where the committee wants to go with this exactly. We've thrown out some ideas of what we could do. I think minimally the disclosure is something that we could take care of and be confident we're not getting ourselves in trouble with. Maybe some of these other ideas, if you guys want to work on it for us and say from your point of view, what it would take and the cost, some kind of cost analysis, you know, if we send letters to this person and send letters to these people. I'm just thinking out loud here. And sort of bring us in January the pros and cons if we do this, or, you know, it would be this, it wouldn't cost staff an extra person, but it would accomplish this, or vice versa. Is that something that we could put
I think I
together?
just heard extra person.
Yeah, I heard
Yeah,
a
we can do
planner.
that.
Then we do another planner for the back.
Yeah, we can, you know, detail out some scenarios.
Well, and that's what try to somehow categorize what's going to happen if we would do this compared to this, or if we didn't vote. Categorize isn't the right word I'm looking for, but you know.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of tells us to be,
Scenarios.
a couple scenarios and kind of going
For
through. a little
January.
profile.
Yeah, well, we're not meeting in December, so January, and it'll be a new committee, and we'll see how they feel about that. I don't know if I'll be here or who, but then it will work into the process of our review and changes to the UDO anyway, I think. I don't think we'd get anything done before then. So, unless somebody else has some ideas they'd like to throw out there so they could consider it, work on it, bring it to us, and us maybe in January.
Well, I think as long as you know, what's included in that is some of the concerns about the responsibility that we would take on if we did do direct
Right.
mail, right?
Right.
But at least being cognizant of the fact that we want to be
And
able
maybe-
to let people know that they have to watch for those
Work
companies.
We wouldn't do it.
Mr. Vanderspool's handout in
Correct.
here, what his suggestions are, and what would happen under each scenario of what his suggestions were, or what kind of trouble we would get into, or how it would work or not work, so we could address these each. And then anything else we've talked about, like the disclosure, just sort of a little outline, so we kick a lot of ideas around, but without an outline and the pros and cons of it, we sort of don't get anywhere on this thing. So, and I think everybody is sympathetic and does have concerns that there's issues. But on the other hand, you know, where do we go with it, and how do we get it on paper to make it work?
And at this point, the concerns are really just with noticing. There's nothing that anybody's identified physically that we should change, or regulations that,
Like the standards that were included.
I don't think so. I haven't heard anything. I think
Right,
it's-
you know, I feel like 50% is that's fine.
well,
I'm not a
but-
problem with our impervious
And
surface.
we're talking 900 square feet for the
Yeah.
ancillary
Yes.
and the setbacks and stuff. That all seemed to be thought out pretty well, other than the more about the notice. And if there's anything else that I'm forgetting or addressing of these issues here. so we can sort of get a pattern and get this thing
Sure.
going along.
No, and I think one of the other takeaways that I've got written down is to put it right on the card, to put it on our.
Yes, yeah, right, and Joe?
If you're going to do notice, I wouldn't do certified mail. I would literally have them, you know, with the boundary on Athena right now, you can get 250 feet and it takes about 10 seconds. And I would literally just say, have the person bring the letters to you and we'll mail them, rather than $6 an envelope and trying to find green cards. Actually, it's $7 now.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would be part of what they're outlined for us, is the cost effect.
Something like that.
Yeah, the cost effectiveness, time, how does it delay the permitting process?
By the way, courts in the past have held for zoning purposes, 250 feet is about the maximum you can go.
Okay. And I don't know that.
I think that makes sense. I mean, my point is that, right, if the neighbors, if your next door neighbors
Yeah.
aren't gonna be worried about it,
Then
That's
then
fine,
the
yes.
third guy over probably shouldn't be.
right? Although I would say one of these letters, like I'm realizing in a town issue, which is not part of the county, because we're totally incorporated. One of my friends is very mad because she didn't read her letter she got from the city, and they put a sidewalk in her yard, right? And so make sure the address of where this is happening is on that letter, right? Not just some like, there's going to be whatever. And this week, right? Yes, because she did not know, and she got it when they were talking about her house.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know,
Right, yes.
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 Crystal Lake did that for years, and they finally just gave up. It was, every time once a year, they would add, you know, a
Yes.
couple of miles of sidewalk
Yes.
someplace, and it was guaranteed that the meetings would be, you know, 150 people are going, leave my yard alone.
Yeah. So, yeah, make it clear whose house you're talking to. So,
Okay, anything else on this? And I think this is our last regular committee meeting before the election. So I want to thank all of you. I think it's been a great committee.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate being here with you. And thank staff for getting us through some of these tough topics. And if everything goes good, maybe I'll be working with you next year.
Awesome. Thank you all too. It's been a fun year, humbling first meeting certainly, but thank you.
Yeah, well, how long you been? Adam, when did you take over?
13 months.
13
Oh
months.
man, time flies.
Yeah.
Sure does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And,
Yeah, right.
we don't have any need for an executive session, so I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Carolyn Campbell, seconded by Michelle. All those in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Dan?